Hello creative people and welcome back to the Makerspace. I'm going to do a follow-up video today on how to draw a photorealistic portrait in CorelDRAW. So two of the goals I hope to accomplish in this video today are, first of all, to show you some additional tips that I didn't include in my last video, and to also share with you some kind of more of a step-by-step process to accomplish a portrait. The true objective was to include a portrait in one of my aircraft illustrations, and I showed that to you in my last video. If you recall the float plane that I did where I had my wife inside the airplane with her dog Dakota. So let's jump right into this tutorial and I'll show you how we do portraits. All right, come on. I really want to take advantage of this video to show you a more step-by-step process that I use for creating something like a portrait. So basically what I do is I start off with the picture, I import that into CorelDRAW, and then from there what I want to do is I want to look at the photograph and I want to look for different tones in contrast, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be breaking down all these tones into those closed cell shapes that I spoke about in my last video. And if you need to kind of refresh on that, you can go back and look at that. That's where I show you how to do a photorealistic t-shirt illustration using the F-18 Hornet as an example. In this case here, I'm looking for different changes in tonal value, and if I don't see enough of them, like this one here, it's kind of lacking contrast, then what I'll do is I'll adjust that contrast. So I'll click on the image and I'll go up here to Effects, Adjust, Brightness, Contrast, Intensity. And these values would typically be set at 0 first, and I'd say OK. And I'm showing you this because I kind of want to start from scratch. I want to reset those values back to 0, because those values will be at whatever they were last time you used them. So I might have done some other work in a different project. Those default values would then be set when I opened that command. So here I'm going to reset those values to 0, say OK, which takes us back to the beginning where we were. With the picture still selected, I go back up here to Effects, Adjust, Brightness, Contrast, Intensity. And here we are. I'll pull this off to the side so you can see. We're set back at 0, 0, 0 for all three of these values. So I know, for instance, when I was playing around with these values, that this value here, this brightness value of 6 was good. And the intensity value of 6 was also good. See, now we're getting a little bit brighter, but we need more contrast. And I remember from playing around with these values, I happen to find that 41 worked really well. So here we have a brightness value of 6, contrast of 41, intensity value of 6. And now if you look at this image, I'll just click on OK, click on the screen just so everything is cleared out here. You can see now I've got some really nice values in here. I can create shapes around all of these different values, and that is definitely a much improved version from where we started. If I use undo, you can see that's where we started. If I said redo, this is what we ended up with. That's much better. So knowing that this is the point from which we want to start, the next step is to make a copy of this and pull it off to the side. We'll just click on the image and go Control C for copy, Control V for paste, and now we have a copy on top of itself. So we'll click in the center here. We'll click anywhere basically, but I usually click from the center. Click, hold, and then go quickly to the Control key, hold it down, and pull this image over to the side. If I hold the Control key down, it goes in a straight line, either up and down or left and right. So then what I do is I let go of the mouse button first, and then the Control key last. All right. So the reason that I've done this now is because I want to turn this image into a black and white image, and I want to leave this image as color. I'll show you why here in a second. So we're going to click on this image, and we're going to go up here to Effects, Adjust, Desaturate. Okay? So now you can see again why we went to the trouble of changing those values in the intensity, the contrast, and the brightness over here, because now those values have translated into really nice halftones over here in this grayscale image that we've got. And this will be really easy to work on. See, for instance, the shape here is easily traceable. this shape here. So this, everything in here is really going to be easier to work on now. All right, so from there, we go to the next step. So the first step that I like to start with is by defining the shapes of the face. I like to create a border around the perimeter of the face and get that well defined. And then from there, I sort of work my way in, starting maybe with the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears. And then from there, I'll work my way in further to these individual shades of gray here, starting with, the most obvious ones. And then you can zoom in and out. You can define shapes easier once you're really tightly zoomed in, obviously, because you can see them better. You'll be able to go around and define these shapes easily. And just kind of work your way until all of the shapes are defined to your satisfaction. You can kind of decide on the fly how detailed you want to get. If, for instance, you see like this darker, almost a black color right here, and then you see a lighter shade here, and a lighter shade here, and a lighter shade here, and a lighter shade here, it's totally up to you as to how many of these shades or tones you want to define by outlining them in your sketch. You can sort of, you could do all of them, or you could do just a few of them. It really depends on how photorealistic you want to get. And obviously, the more shapes you include, the more realistic it's going to be. And it's totally up to you. But you kind of get a feel for it once you start defining shapes. So usually what I do is go over here to the freehand tool, and I like to use the straight line segment option instead of the curve option, because I can kind of navigate my way quicker that way. And I do that by double clicking as I'm creating this kind of continuous line segment. And I just work my way around like so. And I'm just double clicking. I find a point along this face and I double click. And you can always go back and edit these things later. So if you find that you maybe didn't define a shape well enough, you can always go back by either dragging nodes around or clipping parts of that line and adding new parts to that outline. It's totally up to you, but you can edit anything. So don't get too crazy about trying to define things perfectly the first go around. More than likely you wouldn't be able to do that. So here what I'm doing is I'm going to end that shape right there. So here's one of the tricks I showed in my last video with the F18 illustration. You can window all of those straight line segments, and you can just right click anywhere out in space and you click on to curve. That converts these straight line segments now to curves, and then you right click again somewhere out in space there and you click on smooth. And see what it did there? This is the pick tool. I'll just click on the pick tool one time and then click somewhere in space. That deselects the line here and allows you to see it without all the nodes and everything. But you can see here now, it made this line much more organic and fluid here. Now, if there's anything that I want to edit, I can always just click on the line one time, find one of the nodes here. Let's say this one, for instance. You see these arrows that pop up? You can take those and you can drag them and move them around until it fits the contour that you're trying to define a little bit better. Let's say up here, for instance, let's see what we've got. We've got a node here, so let's see, we can drag this in a little bit and we can go like so. And you just kind of move around and define these shapes. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Double click, double click, double click, double click. And work my way around. Like so. And then I'll just kind of go off here beyond this outline, because I can use this line now to trim this line here once I get this line defined. You'll see here in a second what I'll do. So I'll go here to the shape tool, click on that, window the whole line segment, right click, to curve, right click again, smooth. There you go. And see how that did a nice job of smoothing that around? And if we want to, we can go in here and we can just kind of define these curves a little better. And you can see here just how easy it is to edit these things. Very easy. That's why I said don't get too crazy about trying to make the line as super accurate as you can. You can get kind of close enough, and then you can go in here afterwards and you can drag these nodes around to make that line perfect, or as perfect as you can get it, right? So now, like I said, I extended this line beyond this line right here because this line was good. This was the line that I was still kind of refining. And once I have it refined, I'll just click here on the pick tool, select somewhere in space, just to deselect everything. Go up here. I'll go up here to the crop tool, click, hold down, and drag to this virtual segment delete button. And now we can window that line and trim it. See that? So that's what we do. We go around and we use this freehand tool to just kind of click, double 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 click. Again, double clicking tells CorelDRAW that you're going to do a continuous line of multiple segments. If I just single clicked, it would just stop right there with that one line segment. I go here to the shape tool. I window all of those individual segments now that are part of one continuous line segment. Right click to curve, right click, smooth. And then you can see here just how close I was able to get that. You can also window multiple nodes. So here I'm going to window two nodes together, and then I can click and I can drag them both up or down or anywhere I want at the same time. Click on the screen to deselect, and there you go. See, now I've got that nice shape kind of defined right there. Over here, I need to do something here with this. I can drag that up a little bit. There we go. And that's looking pretty good right there. Same thing now, I'll go back here to the freehand tool, go to my endpoint of that line, double click, double click, double click, double click. All right, there we go. Shape tool, window those line segments to curve, smooth. All right, so you can see it's really fun to just go around and define all those shapes and just take your time. Get in here as close as you can, whatever's comfortable to you, so you can still see the object here. Obviously, if I'm like this, it's kind of hard to see what I'm working on. But if I'm zoomed out like this, for instance, you know, I can see this curve much easier. So here's another trick. You can go over here to the freehand tool again, click on that, and you can just, let's say we want to define, let's say this shape right here, for instance, this darker shade that's in the middle here. It almost kind of looks like the outline of Italy here where we have the boot, you know. So what you do is you just go over here, like I said, click on the freehand tool. You can actually click and hold down the mouse key and drag your mouse around on your mouse pad, and you can trace around. As long as I'm holding down that mouse key, just click and drag around that shape. See here? I've got that sort of darker shade right there, and I'm just holding down the mouse key while I'm dragging that line around that shape. All right, I want to go up here, and I'm going to come back around and touch the end of that. Look at that. See that? Again, I'm going to click and hold down the mouse key, and I'm going to drag this around, and I'll go inside that line Now with this line still highlighted, see here the bounding boxes show that that line segment that I was working on is still selected. I can go here, click on the node of that endpoint right there, click, hold down the mouse key, and just continue to draw that shape around. There we go, and let go. Okay, so now I have this shade of gray defined, and these endpoints now can be trimmed by going over here to this virtual segment delete tool, click on that, and now you can just click and drag a window across that line segment that's protruding into your shape there, and it'll trim it. See, I just create a window, trim it. That's it. There you go. So we got the next shape defined. And then again, go back over here to the freehand tool. I'll start right over here, click, hold down the mouse key, and drag this around. I can see there's a darker shade right here. Okay, I'm going to go around that shape. It appears to go down around here. This is really fun. It's just kind of relaxing work just to go around and to find these shapes. Now if I wanted to, I could just go to this line right here and just let go. I find that if I do that, oftentimes what it does is it may create like a little, here I'll show you, it'll create something like this. It doesn't always end cleanly at that line when you do it. You'll find like these little, I like to call them whoop-de-doos. I'll find like these little things in here that I'll have to go back and trim later on. So for that reason, here if I just do the undo command, I typically like to draw my line segments by just letting them extend past and into this area here where I can use that virtual segment delete tool that I mentioned, click, drag a window around it, and trim it. See that? So that's what I do. All right. So you kind of get the idea of how that's done. And you just kind of work your way around. You find these tones, you outline them. And an interesting thing is once you get these tones kind of surrounded with an outline like that, that's where you can kind of look in and you can say, all right, maybe there's a little darker tone inside that tone, for instance. And then this is where I said earlier, it's totally up to you as to how detailed you want to get. And this is kind of what'll make or break how photorealistic something is. It's kind of like resolution. The more of these enclosed shapes you include, the higher the resolution is of your image when it's done. And in the final product, that'll make a whole lot of sense to you. Right now, it may not make a whole lot of sense, but it will at the end, trust me. And you'll see the difference between just adding a few shapes versus adding quite a few shapes. Makes a big difference, in my opinion. But here's, like I said, maybe you see a darker color within that color. Like for me, I see this now. I didn't see it initially, but I do see it here. I see this shape right here, right? And it comes around, because I can see sort of a lighter gray. Right? You agree with me? You see that right there? I also see this little thing right here. There we go. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. When you use the freehand tool by clicking, holding down the mouse button, and dragging a shape around, oftentimes you'll get like these little things like this, these little anomalies here. You can go here to the shape tool, click on that node, kind of zoom in, and you can see what's going on here. You could make a nice smoother transition if you wanted to, like that, or even like over here. If I click on this, for instance, something's going on over here. Yeah, see this little arrow right here? It's showing me that that could be dragged over to there. This, for instance, I might want to leave it, or I might want to make it smooth. And I can do that kind of in a clever way by adding a node here, adding a node here, and then deleting this node just by double clicking on it. See that? Same thing over here. Here we go. Same thing. I could double click to create a node there, create a node there, and double click to get rid of this node. There we go, and it smoothed it out. Now you don't have to do that, but I'm showing you that technique because it's a useful technique to use when you're doing illustrations. Whether or not you want to do that, here at this stage of the illustration, it's totally up to you. You don't have to at all. It'll still work just fine. I'm just kind of like a little anal when it comes to seeing jaggies like that. I kind of want to know, why are they there? Like this one here, for instance, you know, I might just drag that around just to make it smooth. But anyway, that's my OCD kicking in here. Here's another example. This kind of stuff. I see this and I really want to know what's going on. And there we go. I can live with that. All right. Anyway, enough of that. But I wanted to show that to you. It's a cool technique. So there we go. Now it looks like a big scar on her cheek. She'll never forgive me if I just left it like that. I'll need to keep going around and defining the rest of these shapes. So we'll do that. So once we've decided to our satisfaction now that we've got all those tonal values kind of encapsulated with these outlines that we've drawn, our next step is to make a copy of those outlines and to pull them off to the side. So what we do next is window all of the shapes that we've drawn without including the photo. So as long as we don't window around the entire thing, we should only get the shapes that we've just drawn. And now what we want to do is hit Control-C for copy, Control-V for paste. That puts a copy of it on top of itself. Click, hold down the Control key, and that's important in this next step here. Hold the Control key down so it goes in a straight line over to the side, and let's just drop that out here in space. Let go of the mouse key first and the Control key last. Okay? So now here are all of the shapes that we've just drawn over here without the photograph. We just want the outlines. And now what we're going to do is we're going to window everything here, and we're going to go up here to Arrange, Group, or Control-G on your keyboard. And what that does now is that turns this all into one object. Okay? So now from there, we can continue to the next step, and we're getting to some really fun parts of this project here that I enjoy doing the most. This is kind of the labor-intensive part of the project, getting all of these shapes drawn and all that. And it looks really bizarre when you look at this up close, but trust me, it's going to really come out very nicely here in the end. So one of the important steps is that you sort of keep all of these things in line horizontally. That's really important. And the reason why is because once we've copied our shapes off and we've turned that into a group, we want to now take this group of line segments that we've drawn and we want to move it on top of this color image. So we're going to click, start to move it, and then as it's moving, hold down the Control key, and we're just going to place it approximately in the middle. If you kind of slowly move it, you'll see the outline kind of appear. See how it's sort of appearing on top of the image? And we can let go of the mouse button first and the Control key next. Now notice now I've left that outline that we just moved still highlighted. You can see it's highlighted because it has these black bounding boxes around it. And using the mouse scroll wheel, I can zoom in and I can see the alignment of the outlines that we've just put in there on top of the photograph. And I'm going to use the left and right arrow keys on my keyboard while holding down the Control key and just go left, right, left. See how left, right, and I'm going to move over to the left until my outlines line up on my photograph. So you can kind of play around with that and see. That looks pretty good right there. So now I'm confident that that is about as lined up with my color photograph as I'm going to get it. So I'm happy with that. Okay? So we're going to leave that on top of the color photograph, and we can window those two things now and go to Arrange, Group. And now that is all one object. See, if I move it, it's all one object. I'm holding down the Control key, by the way, while I'm moving that to the side, because I do want to keep that horizontal alignment intact. Okay, so I have that now. And if you notice, I'll erase this. So here you can see now what we've done. We have a black and white image and we have a color image. And there's a really important reason for doing that. And that's going to become apparent here shortly. So the next step is to make a copy of this. We'll do Control-C, Control-V, We'll move it off to the side. We'll go up here to Arrange. We'll select Ungroup. Click on the screen somewhere just to deactivate our selection. So what we just did was ungroup the outlines that we had brought over from the photograph that's underneath it, the black and white photograph. And we're going to click one time on that black and white photograph and just hit the delete key. Okay, so now we should have this. This is how we're going to start doing our work. And you can move over and give yourself a little space. And the reason that we made a copy of this is because, as I showed you in my last video with the F-18, we're going to start taking this apart into individual shapes and creating closed cells of each one of these shapes. I'll make that more clear by showing you what I mean here. So for instance, let's use our virtual segment delete tool and start off on one shape. Let's start off, let's see, let's pick a shape. Let's start off with this shape right here, okay? So I'm just going to cross over the lines that I want to trim with that trim tool that we've got. And this is how you do that. You just kind of cross those lines and they'll disappear. If they're touching an object, it'll trim to that object. And you have to make sure that you kind of get these little stragglers that are left behind if you don't window the whole shape entirely. You can see here how that's coming together. All right. And I'm using the mouse scroll wheel to zoom in and out. And if you hit a line that eliminates, like for instance here, if I hit that line and I'm, oh gosh, I don't want to do that, just simply go up here to your undo command and it'll come back. And you can just continue on with your trimming commands right here. Okay. Oops, see that? Undo. Okay. And what I do, like I showed in my last video, is I try to trim the lines that are up close to the object that I want to keep first. Because once you get all those lines that are up close to the shape you're trying to keep, then you can kind of window those other shapes in mass in a large sweep and get rid of them all much quicker than doing it this way here. But this is kind of the tedious part of the project where you just kind of have to be careful. You want to go around and you want to get these shapes right here. Make sure you get them all. Don't leave any stragglers behind. Use your scroll wheel to go in and out to make sure. Yeah, see, this one's being stubborn, but that's okay. We got it. All right. Now we can start going in and making much broader sweeps, especially when I get down lower here in a second. I'll show you. Okay. There we go. There we go. Now look at this. You can do this all in one shot. Boom. That one in one shot. That in one shot. All right. And so now we're left with this shape that we want right here. And so what we can do is we can select all those line segments and we can go, let's see, we want to go to the Join Curves command right here. And we want to select Apply. And here I'll show you a little trick that I've learned kind of the hard way, if you will. But notice how if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that this line right here is one value of black. But this line right here is sort of a darker value of black. See that? It'll come a little easier once you kind of get a little knack for doing this kind of work. But basically what it's showing me is that there is a line on top of another line. Select somewhere on that shape, click and drag and hold the control key down, move it over to the side. There, see that? That was the line that was laying underneath. We want to delete those. So let's go ahead and delete that. We just want to keep the outline that we've created. And now we can give it a color. We'll go over here to Uniform Fill. We'll give it a color. Let's say red. Boom, there we go. So that's the first shape. And then, like I showed you in the other video with the F18, we'll window the outline again, Control C, Control V, and we'll bring it over, and we'll select the next shape that we want to do. So let's say, let's see, we did this one here first. Let's do the one that lays up next to it next. So let's just, let's do this shape right here. So this is kind of the fun part, because you kind of have to look and see where does it come down, and it intersects, okay, right there, and it intersects over here. So we can get rid of all these little line segments. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay, kind of move quickly up through here. We can go across this. And let's see what we've got. This comes all the way over and it ends over here. Okay, perfect. So we'll just go ahead and we'll just trim all the way over here. Continue on around. Okay. Oops. Undo, remember? You can zoom in. There we go. That's why I never worry about doing this kind of quickly, because you can always undo. That's the nice part. As long as you catch it. Now if you kind of continue on after you've made the mistake, you're going to have to undo. You might end up losing some of the work that you've done because you didn't undo right after you made the mistake. So kind of just make sure you keep an eye on things as you're doing it. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. But you see how it goes right here. It's going really smoothly. Okay. And just kind of keep going around. Okay. Getting close to that point where I can start using much broader sweeps here to get rid of more line segments. So like I said, you want to get the ones that are up close to the shape that you're trying to keep, just so you can get to the bulk of the rest of the shapes quickly. There we go. Continue on down. All right, looks like we can now move a lot faster. Zoom out a little bit. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, see? There we go. It's a perfect example of how getting those objects up close and personal really help you get to the bulk of the shapes right here quickly. There we go. All right. So let's see. We can zoom into this now. I do believe we've got some overlapping lines again. So again, I'll show you. We just go ahead and we window all these. We go over here to join curves, apply, and click one time on that. Click and drag, hold down the control key. All right, we don't have any underlying lines, so that's great. But that's a great way to check. If you were to drag that over and you saw little line segments left behind, you would know that those were underlying lines that need to be deleted. Delete those. Now you've got your shape. Go to the paint bucket, uniform fill. Let's give it a different color. We'll say this blue. All right, there we go. And now we can drag this over. So what you do is you just kind of hover over the outline and move along until you see a node pop up. See right there it says node? All right, so if we click and drag, and I'll show you this here. Here's a kind of a rough example of that. Kind of move along. It says edge right now, and then it says node. Okay, now if we move up here, there should be a corresponding node on our red shape. There it is. See that? Node to node. All right, so now we've got those two shapes lined up. And we would continue along with the next shape. So because we've already done a Control V, Control C, remember we did that to get this blue shape? We also did it with the red. We did Control C, Control V, we copied them all over. The computer should still have all of these outlines in memory, so you don't have to do a Control-C, Control-V again. You would just do Control-V. And it should hold down the Control button as you're moving, have all those shapes still in memory. It did. Boom. There you go. And we would just go ahead to the next shape that we want to trim out. So we had this shape first, we did this shape second, maybe we want to do this shape third. All right, so you would just go ahead and you would start trimming away all of those shapes, just like we did the first two. You get the picture, and we would just go from there. All right, so I won't burden you with doing all of that. You get the idea. But that's how we would do it. And we would go through and do each one of these shapes, move them over into position, and then continue on. Control-C, Control-V, bring a copy over. And then the idea would be to have all those shapes brought over into position until you ended up with this. And for each shape, I assign a kind of a wonky color to it so that it stands out from one shape to another. So two adjoining shapes wouldn't have a similar color to them so that they're easy to spot side by side. See here, I can easily tell where each shape begins and ends. And that's important because what we're going to do is, like for instance, if you look here, see all those shapes that we brought over, these are all individual shapes now. So I'm going to just say undo, undo, undo. We're going to window all of those shapes. We're going to go to Arrange, Group. So now the computer sees that as one shape. It's now 364 objects comprising one group. And if I move, holding down the Control key again, remember that's important, it moves in a straight line. If I click and hold and move that over, we can now find that color image that we had, and we can drag it and place it right over next to it, and then zoom in so that we have those two images side by side. So you can kind of see the progression of how we started. We actually started off with the color image that we converted to a grayscale, and then we adjusted it using the brightness, contrast, and intensity until we got all those different great tonal values in there. We created the outlines around it, and then we dragged a copy of those outlines out off to the side, and we created these shapes like we did here a few steps ago. And then from there, we put them all together into this composite of now these closed cells all snapped together like a magnet to create a mosaic image of the color photo that we started out with. And since we had made a copy of our outlines and we placed it on top of the color image, we now have a roadmap to finish our portrait. And this is the most fun part of the entire process. Trust me on this one. It's like all the hard work pays off now, and we get to have some real fun. And I'll show you why, because this is my favorite part by far. So using this color photograph with the outlines laid on top of it as our roadmap, we're going to go over here to the eyedropper tool, and we're going to click on it, and now just start anywhere. But what's really cool about this is you can see now where these shapes begin and end. And each one of these shapes, what we're going to do is find the medium average color that's in each specific cell. So we have kind of a darker color here, a lighter color here. So we'll kind of pick somewhere in the middle. Let's say here, we're going to click, and now you can see the little paint bucket. We'll go over to the same corresponding shape over here on this one with the wonky colors and drop that color into it. See that? And now we go back to the eyedropper tool, click on that cell, click. Eyedropper tool, click on that cell, click. And slowly but surely, this image will start to come together into a photorealistic representation of our color photo in vector art format now. Now, why is vector art format important? Well, that's important because vectors are scalable. You can bring them up and down in size almost infinitely, as large or as small as you want them, without losing any detail. And that's really important because it's sort of like we've done all this hard work now. We'd like to be able to utilize it in as many different ways as we can. So let's say, for instance, we wanted to do a very small sticker, but let's say we wanted to drag this image up as large as, say, a billboard, for instance. I mean, I don't know why you'd want a billboard of a portrait, but hey, you never know, right? You could do it because vector art is scalable. It's also really important because you can take a vector image and you can drag that into your t-shirt artwork, and you can scale that artwork up and down to fit different size requirements. Like, let's say you have a t-shirt you're going to do for a toddler using like one of those one-piece baby outfits, for instance. Those are very popular now. You could do a design, let's say you had unicorns, right? You could do the unicorn design on this little one-piece baby outfit. But let's say you had a young child that wanted a t-shirt and you wanted to scale that image up. Well, you could do that easily using this vector art that you've created now, and you wouldn't lose any detail at all. So here we're just going around and we're just selecting a value from the color photograph using the eyedropper tool, and we're just going to go around and select each corresponding cell and click, drop, click, drop. And we'll just work our way around until the portrait is done. Here's another cool tip I wanted to share with you. As long as these two objects here are grouped together, so let's just verify that they're grouped together. We can go around here and we can say, okay, it's a group of 364 objects. Let's window around this. Let's just make sure. Yep. As long as these two images are grouped together, then what we can do is we can drag them around, and I can use the Control Home key to place that on top. See, if I use the Control N key, it would place it behind it. If I do the Control Home key, it'll place it on top. But what I can do now is I can click and drag this over, so now these ears are lined up, but I can zoom in and I don't have to go from all the way over to the far left of the screen to bring the color back over here to the right. And that also does another thing. It really helps speed up the process because you're not having to go back and forth from such a large distance on this screen. I can get right up close and personal now with this, like so. So now you can see I can really make some progress through here. Make sure I click. There we go. Drop. All right. So we'll just continue on around. We'll add our colors. And let's come back to this here when we're done. Here we are. We finally have all of the shapes. Let's get this one here. There we go. Done. We've got all the shapes filled in now with the color from the photo next to it. And we are ready to make some decisions here. So now this is all done. This is all 364 individual closed cells making up one group. So how about that? Now that's a far cry from that F18 that we did in the last video where we had a couple thousand shapes, right? So that's why I said this is a lot more manageable. As far as the first project goes, 364 objects. It goes quickly, as you saw. We just, copied and pasted, and then we closed those cells using that join curve command. And we ended up with this. That's pretty cool. If you were to window this again, or since it's a group, you can just click on it one time. Go back over here to our pen tool and go outline color. You could select white, for instance. That's kind of weird. Let's undo that. Or you can even go up here and you can say no outline. And it gets rid of the black color that borders each one of those closed cells. If we zoom out, you can see the effect here. But typically what I do is I give it kind of a light gray tone. That seems to work best. I usually go somewhere slightly past halfway, a little on the darker side, and give it a hairline outline. There we go. All right, so there you go. So because I'm putting my wife's portrait inside this airplane illustration that I'm doing, I wanted to put a set of headphones on her head. So I've gone ahead and I've drawn up these headphones here. I found some good source material photographs to work from on the internet. I imported those in. I scaled the images to the size of my wife's head that I'm using in this illustration. So at least I got the scale correct. I drew the outline here. So then, using the same technique as I did with the portrait, I did with the headphones as well. And then I was able to bring those over as a group of objects, just like we did before with the portrait. You can see here, I'll show you. There are the headphones all by themselves. And then I place that into the portrait of my wife. And so now I'm able to take that, and I'm going to also find some reference photos of my wife wearing a t-shirt, kind of in the pose that I want to put her in. I'm going to draw the t-shirt and then put her head onto the t-shirt, and I'll show you that next. Okay, so here we go. What I'm doing here is I'm just making sure that all of the outline colors are the same. So the first thing I do is I go over here to my pen tool and I say hair outline. That's the thinnest outline that I can possibly get in CorelDRAW. You can also, if you went over here, you could add different thicknesses if you wanted to, and they're based on pixels. So hair outline is the thinnest, like I said, so that's what I want. And then I go to outline color, and then I'm going to go to grayscale, and I like somewhere about 3/4 of the way down. So from white to black, I go about 3/4 of the way down, somewhere in the dark gray area, and there we go. That's typically what I like right there. So now what I'll do is, again, window everything, arrange, group. So now what we've got are all of these items grouped together, and we are done with our illustration. Now from here, I can cut and paste this and put it right into my airplane illustration. I'll show you that next, but basically, this is a wrap. This is how you do a portrait. And what's really interesting is it's limitless as far as what you can do editing-wise. For instance, if I didn't like the overall tonal value of everything, you could just select everything all together, or let's say you could ungroup. So I could go arrange, ungroup, and so now basically I should have 3 groups, right? I should have the headphones, I should have my wife's head, seems weird saying that, and I should have her shirt or her torso here. So you get the idea. There's 3 groups right here. So if I undo that now, put everything back, I could take, for instance, just her face, and I could go up here to effects, and I could say adjust, and maybe go to the gamma, for instance, right? Let's pull this over here. And let's say I thought just overall her face was a little bit too dark. I could bring up the gamma on that. That's too much. But you could play around with this. There you go. Maybe make her face a little lighter. You could do that to the whole illustration as a, in general. Let me go ahead and undo that. Or I could make it darker. I could go to effects, adjust, gamma, and maybe bring it down. Make it a little more dramatic. See that? But basically what I'm trying to say is that once you have these things all grouped together into major components like this, you can really do a lot of editing to those. I'll show you the final version here before we wrap it all up, and then I think that's it. This is the final version that I went with. After making some adjustments to the tones, the gamma, all that, the saturation and such, I wanted it to kind of be a little bit subdued. I wanted the airplane to be the main focus of the illustration. But this is what I ended up with. So I can't thank you enough for following along with me here today with this tutorial. I hope you learned something new. Definitely go back and check out the other video I did with the F-18 Hornet. That's got some tricks that aren't included in this one as far as making the closed cells. I show you kind of in detail how to do that. Also, there are some tricks as far as how to use the nodes and the different line segment tools. And I'd love to hear any of your comments down below. And please do me a huge favor, hit the like button for me, please. That really helps me out a lot and tells me that people are watching and like the content. And subscribe for sure. I would love to see you here back at this channel. And hopefully we'll meet again soon. Bye-bye for now.